Chapter 5 of Lorna Doone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Harris. Lorna Doone by R. D. Blackmore. Chapter 5. An Illegal Settlement. Good folk who dwell in a lawful land, if any such there be, may, for want of exploration, judge our neighborhood harshly, unless the whole truth is set before them. In bar of such prejudice, many of us ask leave to explain how and why it was the robbers came to that head in the midst of us. We would rather not have had it so, God knows as well as anybody, but it grew upon us gently in the following manner. Only let all who read observe that here I enter many things which came to my knowledge in later years. In or about the year of our Lord 1640, when all the troubles of England were swelling to an outburst, great estates in the north country were suddenly confiscated, through some feud of families and strong influence at court, and the owners were turned upon the world, and might think themselves lucky to save their necks. These estates were in co-heirship, joint tenancy I think they called it, although I know not the meaning, only so that if either tenant died, the other living, all would come to the live one in spite of any testament. One of the joint owners was Sir Ensor Doone, a gentleman of brisk intellect, and the other owner was his cousin, the Earl of Lorne and Dykemont. Lord Lorne was some years the elder of his cousin Ensor Doone, and was making suit to gain severance of the cumbersome joint tenancy by any fair apportionment, when suddenly this blow fell on them by wiles and woman's meddling, and instead of dividing the land, they were divided from it. The nobleman was still well to do, though crippled in his expenditure, but as for the cousin, he was left a beggar, with many to beg from him. He thought that the other had wronged him, and that all the trouble of law befell through his unjust petition. Many friends advised him to make interest at court, for having done no harm whatever, and being a good Catholic, which Lord Lorne was not, he would be sure to find hearing there, and probably some favour. But he, like a very hot-brained man, although he had long been married to the daughter of his cousin, whom he liked none the more for that, would have nothing to say to any attempt at making a patch of it, but drove away with his wife and sons, and the relics of his money, swearing hard at everybody. In this way he may have been quite wrong; probably, perhaps, he was so; but I am not convinced at all but what most of us would have done the same. Some say that, in the bitterness of that wrong and outrage, he slew a gentleman of the court, whom he supposed to have borne a hand in the plundering of his fortunes. Others say that he bearded King Charles I himself, in a manner beyond forgiveness. One thing, at any rate, is sure. Sir Ensor was attainted, and made a felon outlaw, through some violent deed ensuing upon his dispossession. He had searched in many quarters for somebody to help him, and with good warrant for hoping it, inasmuch as he, in lucky days, had been open-handed and cousinly to all who begged advice of him. But now all these provided him with plenty of good advice, indeed, and great assurance of feeling, but not a movement of leg or lip or purse-string in his favour. All good people of either persuasion, royalty or commonalty, knowing his kitchen range to be cold, no longer would play turnspit. And this, it may be, seared his heart more than the loss of land and fame. In great despair at last, he resolved to settle in some outlandish part, where none could be found to know him, and so, in an evil day for us, he came to the west of England. Not that our part of the world is at all outlandish, according to my view of it, for I never found a better one, but that it was known to be rugged, and large, and desolate. And here, when he had discovered a place which seemed almost to be made for him, so withdrawn, so self-defended, and uneasy of access, some of the country folk around brought him little offerings, a side of bacon, a keg of cider, hung mutton, or a brisket of venison, so that for a while he was very honest. But when the newness of his coming began to wear away, and our good folk were apt to think that even a gentleman ought to work or pay other men for doing it, and many farmers were grown weary of manners without discourse to them, and all cried out to one another how unfair it was that owning such a fertile valley young men would not spade or plough by reason of noble lineage, then the young Doones growing up took things they would not ask for. And here let me, as a solid man, owner of 500 acres, whether fenced or otherwise, and that is my own business, churchwarden also of this parish, until I go to the churchyard, and proud to be called the parson's friend, for a better man I never knew with tobacco and strong waters, nor one who could read the lessons so well, and he has been at Blundell's too. Once for all let me declare that I am a thorough-going church and state man, and royalist, without any mistake about it. And this I lay down because some people, judging a sausage by the skin, may take in evil part my little glosses of style and glibness, and the mottled nature of my remarks and cracks now and then on the frying pan. I assure them that I am good inside, and not a bit of rue in me, only queer knots, as of marjoram, and a stupid manner of bursting. There was not more than a dozen of them, counting a few retainers who still held by Sir Ensor, but soon they grew and multiplied in a manner surprising to think of. Whether it was the venison, which we call a strengthening victual, or whether it was the Exmoor mutton, or the keen soft air of the moorlands, anyhow the Doones increased much faster than their honesty. At first they had brought some ladies with them, of good repute with charity, and then as time went on they added to their stock by carrying. They carried off many good farmers' daughters, who were sadly displeased at first, but took to them kindly after a while, and made a new home in their babies. For women, as it seems to me, like strong men more than weak ones, feeling that they need some staunchness, something to hold fast by. And of all the men in our country, although we are of a thick-set breed, you scarce could find 1 in 60 fit to be placed among the Doones, without looking no more than a tailor. Like enough we could meet them man for man, if we chose all around the crown and the skirts of Exmoor, and show them what a cross buttock means, because we are so stuggy. But in regard of stature, comeliness, and bearing, no woman would look twice at us. Not but what I myself, John Ridd, and 1 or 2 I know of, but it becomes me best not to talk of that, although my hair is grey. Perhaps their den might well have been stormed, and themselves driven out of the forest, if honest people had only agreed to begin with them at once when they first took to plundering. But having respect for their good birth, and pity for their misfortunes, and perhaps a little admiration at the justice of God, that robbed men now were robbers, the squires and farmers and shepherds at first did nothing more than grumble gently, or even make a laugh of it, each in the case of others. After a while they found the matter gone too far for laughter, as violence and deadly outrage stained the hand of robbery, until every woman clutched her child, and every man turned pale at the very name of Doone. For the sons and grandsons of Sir Ensor grew up in foul liberty, and haughtiness, and hatred, to utter scorn of God and man, and brutality towards dumb animals. There was only one good thing about them, if indeed it were good, to wit, their faith to one another, and truth to their wild eyrie. But this only made them feared the more, so certain was the revenge they wreaked upon any who dared to strike a Doone. One night, some 10 years ere I was born, when they were sacking a rich man's house not very far from Minehead, a shot was fired at them in the dark, of which they took little notice, and only one of them knew that any harm was done. But when they were well on the homeward road, not having slain either man or woman, or even burned a house down, one of their number fell from his saddle, and died without so much as a groan. The youth had been struck, but would not complain, and perhaps took little heed of the wound, while he was bleeding inwardly. His brothers and cousins laid him softly on a bank of whortleberries, and just rode back to the lonely hamlet where he had taken his death wound. No man nor woman was left in the morning, nor house for any to dwell in. only a child with its reason gone. This vile deed was done, beyond all doubt. This